Good day and welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar with Red Cloud Securities and Chalice Gold Mines. With me today is Alex Dorsch, who is Managing Director of Chalice Gold Mines. Now, normally we do our webinars at 2 p.m. Thursdays, as probably most of you know, but seeing as Alex is in Australia 12 hours ahead, we adjusted it a little bit, so thanks for tuning in at this alternate time. Before we begin anything, we of course have to go over disclosures. So for Chalice Gold Mines, there may be some forward-looking statements made on this webinar, and I would direct participants to the cautionary note on page 2 of the company's presentation and also located on the Chalice website. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. Also, this webinar does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations and seek their own professional advice before investments. For Red Cloud Securities in particular, we note that in the last 12 months preceding this webinar, Red Cloud Securities has been engaged in a service or advisory capacity by the company. Now, I'll just remind everyone that during the webinar, you can begin to type in your questions at any time. And then when we're done with Alex's presentation, we'll try to get to as many of those as possible. So without further ado, please welcome Alex Dorsch.
Thanks, Jacob. Good to be with you, and good to be reporting on some good news in very challenging times. So thanks to everyone who's joined the webinar, and thanks again to Red Cloud for facilitating it. So today I'll be giving an update on where Chalice is at and our recent news just out of Perth, where we've made a recent discovery. I'll start off with a brief introduction about the company and go from there. The usual forward-looking statements and disclosures, these are available on our website for anyone who is interested. A quick introduction about Chalice. As Jacob said, my name's Alex Dorsch. I'm the Managing Director of Chalice Gold Mines. We're based in Perth, Australia. We're listed on the ASX as well as the OTC QB market. So we're a fairly unique explorer in the junior mining space. We're well funded, and we consider ourselves, I guess, to have a little bit of a different business model than the norm in the space. We've been very successful over the last 13, 14 years in making opportunistic acquisitions, typically at low cost entry-level acquisitions into assets. Exploring and finding commercial deposits and adding significant value to those, but then also divesting them, and that's something that is quite unique to our model. We've managed to not only, I guess, progress a lot of projects, but also to sell a few of them at pretty large profits. So that's generated some significant value for our shareholders. Over 100 million Australian dollars generated from the asset sales over the course of the business, and about a third of that has gone directly back to shareholders in the form of capital returns. So the business has been fortunate enough not to having raised any capital since 2011, which is quite a unique set of circumstances for an explorer that's spending between $5 and $10 million per year on exploration. So we've left ourselves with a decent balance sheet. At the moment, we have approximately $26 million in working capital and investments. Those investments being liquid, and that equates to about 9 cents per share. And we've been very good at managing that balance sheet and managing that capital to remain in a strong position. So that's a brief overview of the company. Our portfolio, just before I jump right into the nickel discovery, which I'm sure everyone is keen to hear about. We have several key gold and nickel projects around Australia. The first one at the top of the list there, which I'll address today, it's a brand new greenfield nickel copper PGE sulfide discovery just outside of Perth, approximately 70 kilometres northeast of Perth. We've got 100% of that project. We staked it a couple of years ago, and it's a large. Apologies for that, everyone. Looks like I had some connection issues on this end. So look, hopefully we can continue on. Thanks, Jacob. Looks like you did a good job there to keep the crowd entertained.
Okay, I'll turn it back over to you. Thanks.
Okay, so apologies, everyone. So I mentioned our second project, the Pyramid Hill Gold Project in Victoria, which I really went through in detail in the last webinar. But just briefly, we've identified again another greenfield gold trend. It's approximately 4 kilometres long. We've got 2 diamond rigs doing the first deep holes on that target as we speak. And that's part of a wider 5,000 square kilometre landholding in the vicinity of the Fosterville gold mine. So anyone who's familiar with the Kirkland Lake gold story would be very familiar with that part of the world. Again, 100% owned. We're exploring in a part of the world that hasn't seen any real exploration undercover. And then in the western part of the northwest part of Australia, in the Kimberley region, we've got another greenfield nickel sulfide project. Again, a very large land holding, over 1,800 square kilometres, and that's a fairly new project for us at the moment. We're waiting on access being regained, but yeah, we're very excited about some targets up there in that part of the world as well. And as it says on the slide there, as well as these opportunities, we have a team of geologists that really looks around Australia for other generative opportunities to stake untested ground. We have several of those opportunities in nickel in WA, on top of the Julimar and King Leopold projects. And we also have a couple of investments, as I alluded to, in that 26 million of cash and liquid investments. We have an early stage royalty portfolio and a couple of non-operated joint venture interests as well. So a fairly significant portfolio. A bit on the cap structure and financial position, as you'd see on the left, for those who aren't familiar with Chalice. Our chairman owns almost a fifth of the company, and he's put in just over $9 million of his own money. We're lucky enough to have Franklin Templeton on the register. They're one of our longest holding shareholders since 2010. And then we have a number of other institutions, largely Australian institutions, holding approximately 10%. There are 274 million shares on issue. The share price has performed very well on the back of the discovery. So we're sitting currently at 50 cents a share, which gives us a market capitalization of approximately 135 million. I mentioned the 26 million in working capital and investments. The 2 key investments there, I'll describe just quickly. Spectrum Metals was a big success story in Western Australia last year. And they made a new discovery, a new high-grade discovery that we like the look of, and we acquired a position in that company, and it's subsequently under offer. We are now an unconditional bid from a company called Ramelius Resources. So that investment has performed well for us. We also own roughly the same interest, approximately 7% of O3 Mining. Those shares were part of a vend. We vended our exploration project east of Val d'Or to O3 in the middle of last year. So the share price there, as you can see, a little bit of weakness with all the turmoil in markets around COVID-19. Unfortunately, we've had a discovery which has really turned the corner for the company and the share price. So who are we? I guess we have a number of mine finders in the group on the left-hand side there. We also have some pretty sound management to give them oversight and also, I guess, commercialize what we find. Kevin leads our exploration team. He's a very well-known nickel geologist. He's found a couple of nickel sulfide deposits in his time. Bruce Kendall is credited with the last sort of significant gold discovery in Australia, Tropicana. So they essentially lead the technical team. And then on the right-hand side, the chairman, Tim Goyder, very well-known individual in Perth, and myself. I've been with the company for 2.5 years now. I came to the company from McKinsey, the management consulting. And then we also have Richard, who's our long-standing CFO. So now into the discovery, which I'm sure everyone is interested in. So this is where we are located in the world. Everyone knows where, I guess, Perth is in Western Australia. So the project is essentially just out of the city of Perth. So we intersected high-grade nickel, copper, palladium sulfide in our very first drill hole, as Jacob said, on our project called Julimar. And this is a essentially untouched intrusive complex that's about 70 kilometres northeast of Perth. So it's about an hour's drive out of Perth, one of the largest, I guess, mining cities in the world. And I guess that's an amazing find to have essentially an unrecognised intrusive complex so close to the city without having any exploration really for nickel whatsoever is quite extraordinary. And obviously its location is not only surprising from that aspect, but it's very advantageous, obviously, for base metals. Highway, rail, power, port access is key. So it really couldn't be in a better location from that perspective. So the project itself, as you see on the left-hand side there, the magnetic image there, you can see there's a approximately 25-kilometre long layered ultramafic complex, which stands out quite prominently in that magnetic image, as you'd see there. And we essentially staked that in early 2018, and at the time it was very much conceptual whether that was prospective for nickel, copper, or PGEs. And there had been a few nearby occurrences for nickel as well as PGEs, but this complex for essentially, because it was largely covered, this hadn't been recognised as an intrusive complex. So quite extraordinary. After we staked that ground, those two tenements there, we looked in through the open file and found that really nothing had been done. So we commenced initially on the southern portion of that intrusion complex. We commenced some ground EM as well as some soil geochemistry. And the reason why we've limited to the southern end of the intrusion thus far is because that's the portion of it which is on private land. So we have a number of private properties which we're currently accessing to do that work. And then north in that northern part of the intrusion, we go into state forest. So as yet we don't have access to get into that state forest, but we will be going through the process shortly to gain access. And obviously, what made the headlines was our first drill hole just earlier in the week. We released the results. We've discovered a very wide and shallow zone of high-grade massive sulfide mineralization. So quite a stunning result for the very first drill hole. On the basis of that, we expanded our land holding in the region significantly. staking some of the other interesting magnetic features you see there on the left-hand side in that figure. So we have a just over 2,300 square kilometres now of applications to really, I guess, take advantage of this potentially new belt or new nickel belt. So the very first drill hole, as you can see on the figure on the left-hand side there, that's essentially a little overview. The background image there is magnetics. So you can see a sort of island-looking shape. It's been described as a lens-shaped magnetic feature, and we've essentially completed moving loop EM over that feature, as well as the soil geochemistry dots that you see there. The moving loop identified about 4 very high priority targets. They were characterized by strong conductance, as well as their discrete nature. As you can see, the conductors there, the yellow objects in A, B, C, and E, they are quite discrete features relative to the background magnetics. So we started drilling the first hole a couple of weeks ago, and that was into conductor E down the southwest corner of that magnetic feature. And this plate was modelled to be about 140 metres of strike and approximately 40 metres of depth extent. So that hole drilled to get an orthogonal intersection through that plate, which is dipping to the west. We drilled our hole towards the east, and at a very shallow depth, a downhole depth of 48 metres, we intersected our massive zone of 13 metres at just over 3% nickel, over 1% copper, and quite amazingly 8.8 grams palladium, and also some platinum in there as well. And that was a real stunner of an intersection. It has to be said. There's a little bit more info to come on that intersection, because we haven't yet received assays for the other platinum group elements, nor cobalt. So it was a quite spectacular hole, and what we really liked about it was that the hole the mineralization we hit corresponded exactly where the modelled plate or modelled conductor was. So essentially, the moving loop EM has taken us right into the hotspot straight up, which is a great sign. And it's also such a thick conductive unit that we believe the moving loop EM now is going to, we believe it's going to have difficulty really seeing below that conductive zone. So we consider that conductor E to be very much open at depth, even open along strike as well, because it's such a conductive unit we've hit there. We think that's going to essentially swamp the EM signal. So we think there's some fantastic upside in and around that intersection, as well as conductor E. On our second hole, we drilled conductor A up on the opposite end of the magnetic feature. Unfortunately, no massive zone. It was always going to be a tough act to follow that first hole, but we've essentially explained that conductor A by the presence of sulfidic sediments, and those sediments were on the contact of the ultramafic, mafic rocks and the country rocks. So a little bit disappointing, but what we were encouraged there by that hole was that there was traced disseminated sulfides through the entire hole, essentially. So it does show that this intrusive complex is fertile, and essentially has proved the concept that this is a layered mafic ultramafic, which is very prospective for these types of metals. So there's 2 other targets there, conductors B and C, that are going to be tested in the coming days, and certainly we look forward to seeing those results. and then we will move back to conductor E to drill, but underneath hole 1 as well as along strike. So it was a very spectacular result in the first hole. Obviously, one hole doesn't make a mine, but it is a quite stunning way to start a new exploration program on a target. You can see from the scale there, the lens-shaped magnetic feature is approximately 2 kilometres south to north. So there is, I guess, plenty of upside in that complex. And in the inset map there, it's worth noting that red box is what you're looking at on the left-hand side. There is about 25 kilometres of unexplored complex running to the northeast that we haven't done any geophysics on just yet. But there are some other targets along that intrusion that we are looking at very closely now. So that's the first hole. Zooming in, just looking at a cross section of that hole, this shallow nickel, copper, palladium rich zone. As you can see, it corresponds almost exactly where the modelled conductor is, the yellow line on that image. You can see there as well the massive sitting above the matrix zone. There's an image there of what the RC chips looks like through that zone. You can see the nickel numbers are very consistent, and that's very encouraging to see, sort of consistently plus 2.5% through that massive sulfide zone. And then what's really intriguing is that the palladium also kicks either side of that sulfide intersection. So we've got a broader zone of 25 meters running 8.5 grams palladium, which is a very, very high palladium grades, and certainly higher than anything we're aware of in Australia. So I mentioned that the ground-based EM is having difficulty, I guess, resolving what's going on at depth here with this conductor, this conductor E, and that's because essentially the conductive zone that we've hit there is so strong that really it's swamping the signal. So the plan is there to, and that's been kicked off earlier this week, is to run downhole EM on all our drill holes. So we are in the process of modelling up the downhole EM on this hole, and that's going to hopefully lead us to where to drill around this hole to see I guess what the extent of this mineralised zone is. Obviously, it's a very high value product in the ground there. We don't need to step out very far to add a lot of tons and a lot of value very quickly. So that's an exceptional position to be in. So we're looking at sort of a modest step out, a look at inside out type of drill off to look at where this zone might lead to. So that's essentially a quick wrap on what we've seen so far at Julimar. The RC rig that we've used out there is still drilling away. So we have that rig on that property. I haven't talked a lot today about what's going on in Victoria, but we're still very much progressing our exploration activities over in Victoria. We have 2 diamond rigs drilling, and we're very excited by the targets that those 2 rigs are drilling as well. So I guess we like to drill things that are going to move the needle for investors, and I guess the first hole at Julimar has done that. We need to replicate that now, but certainly we're still excited by what's going on in Victoria as well. We're well funded, so it's quite unusual for a junior company to be making discoveries with 26 million in their working capital investments. This really does negate the need to raise any capital in the near term. So it allows us to do a lot more work in a short time frame here to progress these things. And I guess the management team and the technical team have a solid track record. So we've sort of been there and done that on a few occasions here on these types of projects. So that is essentially where I'll wrap up, and I think Jacob, I'll hand over to you for some questions.
Great, thanks very much, Alex. So obviously there are people asking questions about Julimar. Why don't we back up, a little bit to the beginning? When did you acquire this ground? How did you acquire it? How did you decide on it? How is it it's never been explored for nickel before? I've been to WA and I'm just stunned that that this is new ground, really.
So there's a few factors to that. So it was early 2018. The ground was vacant, so it didn't have a license on it. And one of our young geologists was looking around in the area, really, I guess, intrigued by the fact that you've got the Yilgarn, the margin of the Yilgarn Craton there, running along the sort of in a north-south orientation in that part of the state. And then you've got some deep or potentially deep-seated structure that runs in a sort of southeast orientation nearby. So I guess it was theorized that that magnetic feature at Julimar could be an intrusive complex with I guess a conduit to a deep-seated structure, but it was a very much conceptual play, and we jumped on it. I guess we liked that type of opportunity, like low-cost entry point. We staked the license, and then we started to look at the work that had been done. And the first thing we noticed was, I guess that may answer your question there about why this thing hasn't been explored, is that the geological survey had basically mapped it as a granitic intrusion, and there was a lot of transported cover. So we've got sort of lateritic gravels and clays overlying these ultramafic and mafic rocks. So I guess that goes some way to explain why it hadn't been tested. I guess a well-known prospector in WA, Mark Creasy, was actually the one who drilled 3 holes actually targeting vanadium in the late 2000s, but for whatever reason didn't look too closely for nickel. So I guess, yeah, it's quite extraordinary. That's essentially the explanation as to why it's been sitting there.
Great. And in drilling, did he encounter any nickel values that you know of?
Look, we believe there was some low level nickel numbers in those holes, but yeah, the real target was vanadium titanium. So it has been an area known for that style of mineralization, as well as bauxite operations sort of in the vicinity. I guess one of the other complications is that there is the state forest, which is not off limits to explorers, but there is a complication, I guess, in accessing that area. So those two things, I guess, probably detracted from people looking in the past.
Okay, I see. A question from online asking if this new discovery at Julimar is going to slow your progress in Victoria at all.
No, our intent is to go full steam ahead on the 2 in parallel. With what's going on in the world at the moment with COVID-19, I guess logistically, we're fortunate that our 2 projects are essentially, in the case of Victoria, a couple hours drive out of a major capital city, and in Julimar, an hour's drive out of Perth. So, they're both able to be worked in parallel. We've got the balance sheet to keep going at a rapid pace. So really, we see no reason to slow down at the moment.
Right. Okay, that's good to hear. Another question from online asking, okay, so you're drilling from Pyramid Hill. When you must be expecting results from that in the near term. I think when I spoke to, his name escapes me now, your VP Corporate Development was in our office recently, just after
Bruce.
Bruce.
Yep. Yep.
was saying, of course, that that first hole is really to get situated and learn the stratigraphy of rocks there. But you must be expecting to get some results from that soon.
Yeah, look, shortly. We'll probably have an update out next week on that, on progress there. Yeah, as Bruce alluded to, and as you've just mentioned, the initial diamond program is really a geological program to try and understand what the architecture looks like in the subsurface. The lack of outcrop obviously limits the ability to target. So we need to, I guess, get a feel for what's going on with the stratigraphy first, and that's what we're doing with an 11-hole drill program. The holes are obviously still targeting gold mineralization, and I guess the nature of the Victorian gold systems is that while albeit narrow, they're very strike extensive. So we're hoping, obviously, one of those diamond holes, or ideally a few of them, give us an indication of where these primary gold lodes may be, and then we can move along strike and and then go into a more of a definition type of drilling.
Have you completed any of those holes yet?
Yeah, so we've completed 3 diamond holes. Assays for the first 2 are very close. We've got 2 diamond rigs working the property now, and unfortunately, both of those diamond rigs are Victorian crews, Victorian rigs, so they can proceed without any interruption from interstate travel restrictions and the like.
Right. So both projects in WA and in Victoria are proceeding as though the world was a year ago.
Yeah, that's right. Look, the WA government's advice at the moment is that mining activities can continue. We'll obviously monitor that, but we're hoping we're obviously putting the risk mitigations in place and the controls to ensure that we don't need to shut down, and hopefully we can continue. Okay,
great. Another question inquiring about diamond drilling for Julimar is, so right now, if I remember correctly, you're in the process of doing an initial 4 RC program, 4-hole
yes.
RC program. And so after that's done, is the plan to go back and drill with diamond at the first discovery hole in the E anomaly?
Yeah, so we're likely to probably add a diamond rig to the mix, and probably have an RC and diamond rig running concurrently, basically as soon as we can get one. So we're looking at a couple of options, and I think in the coming weeks we'll be getting going on a diamond hole. I guess the obvious place anyone could have guessed probably where we were going to put the first diamond hole. It's going to be a step out from our first RC hole there. So yeah, good I guess to get that early geological information, to have a look at some core as well, and to really start understanding this mineralogy.
Mm-hmm. So would you step out 50 or 100 meters to start with, or have you not really thought about that level of detail?
We're looking sort of in that ballpark, that we don't, as I mentioned, it's very high grade and very wide zone of mineralization there. We don't think we need to step out too far just yet. So we're looking in that sort of circa 50 meter step out range. And yeah, I guess the downhole EM is the primary targeting tool to help guide where those holes go.
Okay, so another question asking what suite of metals are being tested from Julimar? So obviously nickel, copper, yep. Palladium, platinum.
Yes, that's right. So we're also assaying for cobalt as well as all the other PGEs. So rhodium, osmium, plus a couple of others. Mm-hmm. Those are we haven't received yet, but they shouldn't be far away. So depending on what we see in those assays for that first hole, we'll sort of pick our assaying for subsequent holes. But yeah, I guess typically these systems do come with a cobalt credit, and often with other PGEs in the mix. So it's very early days, just having one hole. But yeah, certainly the grades we're seeing are quite spectacular.
Yeah, and another question specifically about the high palladium content and specifically the palladium to platinum ratio. Have you identified any other projects in or mines in WA that had that kind of palladium to platinum ratio?
No, look, not that we're aware of. There's a few PGE operations or deposits up in northern part of WA, and the nickel sulfide deposits around the goldfields and that area, and the likes of the Fraser Range, don't typically have the PGE credits in that magnitude. So it is a little bit different, and that's for sure. So exactly what that may lead to in terms of recoveries or payabilities, it's obviously too early to say. But obviously palladium is a very high valued metal at the moment. So we're viewing it as a nickel copper discovery, really, with a very good palladium credit.
Mm-hmm. There's another question actually on the King Leopold project. Apparently, this person saying that it had been postponed because you mentioned access needs to be regained, and they're wondering if you have an update on that.
Yeah, so being in the Kimberley, in the tropical part of WA, we have essentially the cyclone season or the hurricane season, as you may call it, and that runs typically until late April. So we're looking to regain access in probably mid to late May to get in there and really finish what we started in last year's field season. That was essentially some more ground EM work, as well as an RC drill program. One of the unfortunate circumstances around the coronavirus is that some parts of regional WA are being restricted in terms of access. So it's unclear at the moment whether we will be able to get in there when we want to. But obviously we'll be monitoring that, and hopefully we can get in there by the middle of the year.
Okay, great. But the good news is that both Julimar and Victoria Goldfields are full speed ahead.
That's right.
Yeah. Just a question for me. Have you noticed anybody picking up ground around you guys at Julimar since this announcement?
No, we've staked, I guess, being in a position where we have a balance sheet, or a decent financial position. We were pretty aggressive in protecting our position there. So we've staked, I think, everything that remotely looks prospective in the area, as you would understand, as well as a little further to the north along that margin of the Yilgarn. We've got already some granted tenements at a project we call Barra Barra, that have a potentially unrecognised intrusion complex on as well. So we're having a closer look at those tenements. They are granted, so we could start work sooner rather than later there. But yeah, like elsewhere, I guess we'll go through the process of doing our open file compilation, and hopefully those surrounding tenements to Julimar get granted in a sort of 4 to 5 month time period.
Great. Okay, so we've run over 40 minutes, so I think that's a really good time to cut off for today. I'd like to thank you very much for this, making yourself available, especially since it's almost midnight there now, and you just had a new addition to the family, so I know that your sleeping time is very, very valuable.
That's right. Well, I'm not sleeping anyway, so no, it's not my first late call, Jacob. So good to join you and to chat to you. So look forward to the next one.
Incidentally, Red Cloud is going to try and make some time available for one-on-one conference calls early next week. I think Monday, Tuesday mornings with Alex, for those who want to follow up more. As far as future webinars for next week, we already have scheduled Wednesday Red Cloud producers webinar. So that will be Fiore, Gran Colombia, and Monera, is it Monera Emeralds? I'm not sure. And then on Thursday, a separate webinar with Mako Mining that will be hosted by Head of Research and President of Red Cloud, Paolo Streeto. And so please go ahead and sign in for those. And just like to thank everybody again for participating, and stay safe and healthy. And we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jacob.